Welcome to MGO Bucks. We are live here on Tuesday evening. It has been, how many days since Michigan has last lost to Ohio State, Matt? I think it's somewhere in the 1,800 days. I'm not 100% sure, but
Well, it's 3,800 days since you've beaten Ohio State without cheating.
yeah, I don't recognize that stat. But in any case, I just actually I just had COVID actually not too long ago, like just a couple weeks ago, and I was getting over it. And as I was getting over it, it occurred to me, I was like, shit, there was a golden opportunity. I could have gone over and hung out by the Michigan locker room, maybe spread my disease a little bit and have a 2,000 level outbreak that would actually cause Michigan to have to miss this game coming up this weekend. And I thought that was going to be like a great idea. Too bad I didn't actually think of it. I had COVID brain.
Last time they were, favored to beat Michigan by over 20, they canceled.
Still hadn't happened. It didn't happen. I'm sure Michigan would have put up a big fight in 2020. But in any case, Matt, how are you doing?
I am ready for this game.
Ready for this game. Brian, you're here with us. Your beautiful, beautiful little Buckeye helmet. Love to see that. How you been, man?
Best helmet in college football. I'm good. I'm really good. I'm excited. It's been a fun season so far, and obviously, I think every Ohio State fan, player, especially the guys that came back for this instead of going to the NFL, have been waiting for this game. We couldn't turn the page fast enough from the Indiana game, and all the goals for the season are still in front of this team. So it's a lot of fun. It's an exciting season, an exciting time. And it's good to be with you guys. So I just want to know which Bosa brother are we with? Is that Joey or is that Nick?
Joey, 97.
Oh, that's Joey. Nice. Yep, he's playing for Harbaugh now.
Yep.
So is J.K. Dobbins. It's weird.
It's so crazy having that would be hard to do, wouldn't it? Playing for a guy like, I guess for Dobbins and Bosa it doesn't matter because they never lost to Michigan. But it'd be a little rougher for some of the newer players.
Before we get into the college stuff, I didn't see a report on J.K. Dobbins' knee. Is he doing okay?
It hasn't been confirmed yet. I didn't hear anything that was terrible or anything like that, but I haven't heard anything one way or the other. I'm guessing.
Man, with the extent of the injuries he's had to that knee, though, and the number of procedures, it's even something minor could be something major. So hopefully, fingers crossed for that guy.
Yeah, he's really good this year.
Yeah, I think Matt, do you have him on your fantasy football league?
I did. I drafted him.
Yeah,
he's been great. I love JK. Such an underrated Buckeye.
Yeah, well, it's 2,000 yards and no one even talks about it. That's crazy. Yeah. Everyone's acting like the Boise running back is so good. What did he have? He has 2,000 yards also, and they're acting like he's the best thing ever.
Yeah, JK, I vaguely remember that guy.
Jinty's pretty damn good.
Yeah, he is. He definitely is. I'm just saying, no one talked about JK even hinting at him winning a Heisman. It's just crazy. It wasn't even considered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, so there's a game on this weekend, and how are you guys feeling about this? You're kind of probably going into this feeling like this is kind of like a foregone conclusion that Ohio State's going to win, right? I feel that way. I totally feel that way.
Well, going through the Cooper years, I never feel that way.
But Ryan Day is not John Cooper by a long shot. Ryan Day doesn't lose to 6-5 teams, if you haven't noticed.
Yeah.
The closest he came to was last year against Missouri, and Missouri was a good team. He doesn't lose.
And they were
Nebraska this year. Yeah.
No, Missouri was a good team last year, and Ohio State was completely depleted in that bowl game. After losing to Michigan that third time, that whole season went in the tank, and everybody knew it. So that's not even indicative of the way he's played. And I think, Nate, you're right. When he's played, his record against subpar teams has been unbelievable. So I'm confident going into the game. I think I don't love the early spread, and I don't love the weather forecast, but and there's obviously still question marks about this Ohio State team, and there are some really good players on that Michigan team, but it doesn't bode. I mean, the matchup doesn't favor Michigan in any way, shape, or form. And I think this Ohio State team is all about taking care of business on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like I'm thinking, I don't know if it'll be. I think the spread is 21 points. That's a lot. I don't.
That's a
know.
lot of
If I
points.
was a betting person, I might actually take the under on that because I don't.
Yeah,
know
I don't like those. I don't like that spread, and if the weather's bad, I don't like. It makes me not like it even more. But it doesn't really matter. It's really about winning. And it's funny when we went through that season preview show that we did. My comment to you guys way back when was for Michigan. This is a 1-game season. It's really about Ohio State, and if you beat Ohio State, it doesn't matter. I knew this wasn't going to be a good year for Michigan. But coming off that national championship and all of the talk and all the issues that won't they get sanctioned, all that stuff, it really doesn't matter because if they beat Ohio State, the whole season is a win for them. It's a season for Michigan.
That's a stretch considering just at the quarter, the quarterback position for Michigan right now. I mean, do you think? Honest question. This isn't me just dragging my team. Like, do you think any of Michigan's quarterbacks would start in the MAC or the Mountain West?
No, and I can't believe. Honestly, I can't believe that they didn't.
Freshman.
I can't believe they weren't more active in the portal. Even Kyle McCord. As crazy as that sounds, Kyle McCord would be an upgrade on that team.
Now, I know they had a lot of excuses on why they didn't do it because the window for the transfer portal is basically open while the playoffs are happening. That's going to affect Ohio State this year, by the way, too. You guys are going to be playing games in the playoffs and the portal is going to be open. And a lot of players are going to be like, well, we don't know which players are going to be staying or leaving at Ohio State, and it's going to be difficult to get some. Not all of them. I mean, Michigan got some, but they did not get a quarterback, and they were all pretty much great. All the good quarterbacks. Hold on, let me finish this. All the good quarterbacks were kind of taken. And that was the excuse, I think, we're all kind of fed. But if you think, let me give Ryan Day another little compliment here. In 2019, when he took over the program, do you think if he had Michigan's quarterbacks on the roster, do you think he would have just accepted that and gone in? Like, there's no chance. Like, I think in 2019, when he took over, he had Tate Martell, who was a 5-star, and some other quarterbacks, but he obviously knew that he did not want to go into his very first head coaching year with those quarterbacks. He was like, no, not doing it. So he went out and got Justin Fields. So Haskins did not do that.
Haskins was there first. I mean, Haskins was on the roster, but Haskins, if you remember, one of the reasons that
did he leave? I thought he left by then.
No, Haskins was still on that roster because he ended up starting that next year. But JT was still the starter the 1 year that he was the offensive coordinator, and
but that's when Urban was still there.
Yeah, but I'm saying like Haskins, when Ryan Day was running the offense, Haskins was the first year that he really got a chance to stretch his legs as the OC with a true passer, and you saw what a true passer could do at Ohio State, because that was always the rub. Like, through the history of Ohio State, they had the lineage, but they never produced NFL quarterbacks, never. And the Michigan produced tons more quarterbacks than Ohio State had done for the NFL, but that gave them the first one. And then Justin Fields, Haskins leaving was one of the main reasons that Justin Fields came in. And Justin Fields had 2 years there, and then obviously you had C.J. Stroud behind that. So there's been a lineage of NFL caliber quarterbacks since Ryan Day really took over the offense, and that's been a huge difference. And now, even with Will Howard leaving after this year, that quarterback room is loaded at Ohio State. And you're right, Michigan. There's a reason that they had to go out, and Portnoy and those guys had to spend that kind of money to try to pry Bryce Underwood away from LSU. But I mean, people underestimate how difficult it is to develop quarterbacks. Quarterback is a very, very hard position to play. And the jump from high school to college is huge. And the jump from college to the pros is huge. Huge.
Yeah. I imagine it is. And I mean, excuse me, Matt, I know like earlier this year, so Ohio State has a bunch of quarterbacks on the roster essentially now, but you have to think that like the resources they put into guys like Dylan Raiola, who committed, and guys like Quinn Ewers, who was there for like a year. Excuse me. And leaving, like the resources and all of that put into that must have been kind of a drag, and basically made Ohio State have to pay that $20 million to go out and get a roster for this year, right?
Well, they didn't spend $20 million on their roster. First of all, that's how much they spent for retention and new people. So the majority of that was just keeping everyone on the roster. The only people that they spent any decent amount of money on would have been Howard, Judkins. I'm guessing that Sayan probably got a decent amount of money, and then the center
Downs,
Laughlin,
Caleb Downs,
and Caleb.
Yeah, Downs, McLaughlin.
Caleb,
they paid a lot.
They probably spent the most on him. I'm guessing they spent big money on him because he was young and he was all SEC. So, and then Judkins probably got a decent amount of money, but probably a little bit less since he's a running back. But still the vast majority of the money is going to like returning defensive linemen and receivers and stuff like that, like the returning guys. And then I'm sure JJ Smith probably got, 800,000 or something. I mean, he got a lot of money. Still, I think Miami offered him more, from the reports that I saw, but he knows he's going to get first round if he comes and plays for Heartland. So that was an easy choice. But I was going to say, didn't they change the rules on how many scholarship people you can have on your roster? It used to be 85. Now it's like 100 or 115 or something.
I thought it was 105, but I know that change is coming because some I think it's limited to the number that you can spend money on, because one of the things that a lot of the bigger programs, because I think Dabo Swinney was one of the coaches that was griping about the fact that they don't want to be limited because they don't have to be. I mean, they've got enough money to pay even walk-ons, preferred walk-ons can get paid now. So you can, in theory, have an unlimited roster until they went and did this. So it's a different era. I mean, we're definitely in a different era, and you can see it in the way that even the best teams. I mean, I don't think there are very many teams that are going to make this playoff that are capable of winning the whole thing. Yeah. But every one of them has flaws, and there's no superpower. Even Ohio State, as loaded as they are, and by betting odds, the odds-on favorite to win the whole thing, there are still issues. And they still have a makeshift offensive line. The secondary is not playing at a really, the corners anyway are not playing at a super high level. I mean, there are definitely issues, but they're still an unbelievably loaded team. And yeah, Nate, like you said, they're going to lose a lot after this year. There's no question. I mean, it was like Michigan when all those guys decided to come back for that last run. The next year is going to be a transition year. Now, I think Ohio State's going to be more prepared for that transition than Michigan was, but Michigan had the coaching changes and all the issues that they had going on. I mean, we all knew this was going to be a difficult year for Michigan, and I think Ohio State, even with this transition, they're going to look very different next year, but they're still going to be a very good team next year.
Yeah, for sure, they are going to be a good team, and I mean, we'll have to do a show and we'll have to count actually how many Buckeye players we think are going to leave. But it's a lot of senior leadership there too. So that matters, I would say, quite a bit. Matt, you were going to say something.
The big thing is how many juniors we lose. Like, I think, if Sonny Styles is playing really well. Is Cody Simon a senior?
Yeah, he's gone.
So he's gone, and then Sonny Styles has been playing really well, so he's probably going to go.
Yeah, Arvell Reese. I mean, there's it's funny. We were talking about the question marks on this team coming into the season, and the linebacking core was definitely one of them. Yeah, and clearly Cody Simon and Sonny Styles are playing their best football of the year, but I've been really impressed with Arvell Reese too, and I would expect Sonny Styles to come back next year. And with Styles and Arvell Reese, Gabe Powers, some of those kind of guys, and then because I think you're going to see CJ Hicks transition to an edge rusher type of player, and they're doing that a lot more. I mean, after that Oregon game, there's no question they're bringing different packages. They're bringing way more pressures and simulated pressures And that makes it a lot more, that defense is really fun to watch right now.
I'm worried that someone's going to pay Hicks a bunch of money, and because he got 0 snaps against Indiana.
That can't be right, because I saw him out there. He was on a rush. The one that Simon had the sack. He was on the field.
Was he?
Yeah.
I read that he didn't get any playing time against Indiana. So I know he did well.
Even if he is, it's not like it's one of those situations where they're going to I think they're going to transition next year to more of the three-man front with the jack position, because they're not going to have the true defensive ends like they've got right now. When with JT and Jack Sawyer both leaving, and you see like an Edric Houston, who was a big recruit last year, the defensive end is actually transitioning to 3-tech. So I think you're seeing post Oregon, you're seeing more of what Jim Knowles did at at Oklahoma State. Than what we saw before, which was just like, hey, we're going to let our four guys rush the quarterback, and that's just not. They're just not good enough for that. I mean, they're good players, but there's no Chase Young, there's no Nick Bosa out there.
Hey, on this, I saw a podcast today with Steve Dace, and he thinks that Knowles is going to with his words, he's going to dust off the 2022 defensive game plan that they had. When they were letting J.J. McCarthy throw a bunch of bombs. Well, that's not happening this year against Michigan, right? They're going to dust off that.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think that was...
And really put some pressure on Michigan.
They brought pressure. My biggest beef back then was that there was a point in that game, the first loss, I think it was in Columbus, when early in the game, there was a broken tackle that basically went for like a 75-yard touchdown pass in a situation where Knowles went for a kill shot and they didn't need it. He went cover 0, and they didn't have the corners outside to call that. And so he went so hyper aggressive early in the game, and it bit him. And it bit him, throughout that game. And that was a big problem when they ended up playing Georgia later in the season as well. And so it's the same kind of deal. Like they're picking their spots. But what I really like about what they're doing right now is because they're giving different looks, then they can simulate pressure. So there was a play against Indiana. My favorite play of the game defensively was actually a play where they showed pressure. They had been bringing the blitz constantly with the linebackers. They showed it and backed out of it, and Sonny Styles made an unbelievable play on 3rd down on a throw to the running back in the flat, and it was a simulated pressure. And so, when you're showing different looks, then it does not give the quarterback a clear picture. And we've been waiting for that really for the longest time. It's almost like I think Ryan Day, what I love about, the way he's been the last couple of years is like he's been ruthless with some of these decisions. And I think he basically laid down the law after Oregon to Larry Johnson in particular and said, look, we're calling Knowles defense the way he wants to call this. And you've seen the jack position and the linebacker blitzing and the stimulated pressures way more. The 3-man front, way with the stand-up edge, way more than you saw before.
So why did it take 2.5 years to let his defensive coordinator finally play?
I mean, because you've got the best defensive line coach in the country who's done it his way for so long, and he's been successful. But he just, JT, with all due respect, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer are not Nick Bosa and Chase Young. They're just not. They're not even Aiden Hutchinson. They're not even the guys that like they don't by talent. Like you said at the very beginning of the season, Matt, Michigan's got more higher end talent on the defensive line than Ohio State does right now. Ohio State has better depth, but that's really the story. And once you get, if you can't get pressure with your 4 guys, then you have to bring blitzing. But what you can't do is be predictable with it. And you can't consistently bring 5-6 guys. What you have to do is you have to simulate pressures and you have to overload so that you can bring a 4-man pressure, but you're bringing 3 to, you're going 3 against 2 on one side. And that's one of the things about all the pre-snap stuff that's so important. You have to disguise it.
Yeah, well, I'm not really looking forward to seeing Jack Sawyer versus Evan Link.
Dude, did you see how little time that Indiana quarterback had?
Crazy.
After the first drive, he had
their line
no
was good
time.
too.
Yeah.
Well, Michigan's offensive line this year versus last year is night and day.
Yeah.
Jack Sawyer
absolutely.
was not really a factor, or JTT. But I think they will be in this game. I unfortunately think they will be.
Well, I'll give you a little game plan that you need to send to your offensive coordinator. You need to throw some shots downfield at number one, because Davison Igbinosun is a walking PI penalty, and if they call it tight, like he was keeping Indiana in that game single-handedly because they were calling it tight. He just can't keep his hands off receivers.
Didn't he have like 2 PIs in like one drive?
He had 4. He had 4 penalties in the Indiana game alone. 4. And if they're calling it close, it's he's the biggest weakness. And Denzel Burke isn't much better on downfield balls. And really, when you go back to the way that Michigan has beaten Ohio State the last few years, it's been explosives. They've hit them, and that's how Oregon beat them, and that's how Georgia beat them. If you're going to beat Ohio State, you have to hit some explosive plays. You cannot just sit there and grind out drives. You have to hit some explosives.
Definitely when you're playing at the Buckeye Stadium. I would say that's
the other thing you can't do is what Indiana did, which was like they actually played Ohio State really tough until they had a bad special teams play. They had a punt that was basically tackled short. It would have been blocked if he hadn't been tackled. And then they had a punt return for a touchdown, which Ohio State hadn't had in 10 years. But that was a 14-point swing. Yep. And that changed the whole flow of the game. So if not for that, if special teams really let Indiana down, but that you can move the ball in Ohio State, but you're going to have to throw it to do it. And It does help to have a mobile quarterback, because that was the one thing Indiana couldn't do that other teams have done, especially like Oregon, but even some of the other weaker teams they played. I think you can get sometimes in their rushing. Ohio State is not always disciplined in maintaining their rush lanes, and they will give you some opportunities to run from the quarterback position. But Indiana's quarterback wasn't mobile.
So, question for you guys on this. So, assuming Ohio State wins, like, what's going to be your glee level if this happens, considering Michigan is down? I mean, no doubt it would have been much, much more fun to beat a Michigan team that was like undefeated or one loss. But with a 6-5 team, how excited are you guys? Are you I just want to get to the end of this game knowing we beat Michigan after losing the last 3 years.
Well, I think, we've had a lot of bad taste in our mouth the last few years and didn't get to, win in 2020 because we didn't get to play. But yeah, I mean, it'll just be like it's a combination. Like we really want the win, even against a bad team, it doesn't matter. And then also, just hoping to get out without any serious injuries. I also wanted to get back to the point that Brian, and in general, it's true when he said that there was no elite teams this year. And I include Oregon in that. I don't think there are truly any elite teams, but an elite team in the previous years is different than what we're thinking about as an elite team this year. An elite team in a 12-team playoff is a team that has a lot of depth. So we may not be dominant. Oregon may not be dominant every game. Teams like Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama, even when those teams are struggling, they're like in Texas. Those are like some of the only teams that actually have the depth to withstand losing 2 offensive linemen for the year, or losing a safety or a top receiver. None of the other teams are going to be able to withstand that, because Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, and Texas have been recruiting at an elite level, and no one else has the depth to withstand that in a playoff, unless someone really lucky, which is just with this many games, these 17 games, you're going to need to have depth to get through that.
Well, and I agree. I think Ohio State's going to be in the playoff regardless of what happens in this game. But I cannot stomach if they lose this game, to me, it's a fireable offense. And the worst part about this is that, to me, Michigan has nothing to lose. Everyone expects them to get absolutely pasted in this game. And they know they're still a physical football team, They have a lot of pride. They still got guys that have played on the national championship team. They have the confidence they've beaten these guys before. In Columbus, the weather's supposed to be bad. Like if in Ohio State has played tight in big games to start games, and it could very well be one of those games where, especially when you're expected to beat the shit out of somebody, that you don't, you start slow, and all of a sudden they may even be down in the first half, going in the second quarter. The Indiana game was, I think, 7-7 at the end of the first quarter. If you can, and Michigan's going to try to take the air out of the ball, that. So if they can grind some drives and just and run clock and not give Ohio State an opportunity to be on the field, that plays into their strengths. And there are some things to worry about. I mean, there's no question Ohio State is a makeshift offensive line going against a really good defensive front for Michigan. And they didn't really run the ball. The stat line was very deceptive against Indiana because Travion Henderson ripped off a big run at the end. They didn't run the ball particularly well against Indiana, and Indiana's 3-tech defensive tackle had himself a game, and Michigan has 2 of those dudes. So there's reason that this could be an ugly nail biter kind of game. And part of me, Nate, is just what you said. I just want it over with a dub, so we can move on, because it's a box that has to be checked. You cannot lose to Michigan. Was it 4 years in a row? That cannot happen.
Yeah. Well, if Michigan actually had a quarterback that was competent, I would share your worries. And I know you guys, your worries are more like, hey, we think we might play bad in these areas, but we're still going to win.
Right.
If Michigan actually had a competent quarterback, I might feel like, oh, hey, there's that chance because it's the rivalry game. But yeah, with the quarterbacks we have, Davis Warren, it's just not possible. He's going to inexplicably just throw probably 2 interceptions in this game. Maybe not tipped balls. It just might be like a ball might sail on him and it'll just get intercepted. So,
well, the one thing with Ohio State that I've seen
the quarterback for an entire game.
The one thing I describe Ohio State this year is kind of like a boa constrictor. Like they give you confidence that you can play with them, and all of a sudden they just strangle you out. And that's kind of like this defense. Kind of just there are going to be opportunities and drives where you can move the ball on them. And it's really, it comes down to the same things we talk about all the time, but really it's about what you do in the red zone. And if you look at why the Indiana game was deceptive, like, yes, Ohio State controlled that game. I never felt like Indiana was really a threat to win it, but Ohio State didn't put that game away. It was the special teams, those 2 scores that really put that game away. But Ohio State was only 2 of 4 in the red zone, and with 2 turnovers.
Yeah,
that cannot happen again. Because when you look at the Michigan games the last couple years, it was Ohio State's inability to punch in touchdowns in the red zone that cost them big time.
They're not having that problem this year, though.
Not overall. Not overall, but there have been not overall. Overall, that statistically they've been very, very good, and I do think that
Phil Simmons,
having a true read option quarterback, like a guy that you can run zone read, you can run RPOs, and they have JJ Smith, who's an unbelievable, like, when in doubt just throw up a fade, and you've got great play calling, but it's Will Howard's going to have to do something with his legs in this game. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And what teams have been doing is here, like the last, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, I've noticed, is when they get in what they think are going to be read option situations, they're making Howard hand it off. They would rather deal with the running backs on inside zone than they would letting him pull it. So they're not giving him a pull read. And they're doing a good job of, for the most part, of plugging that up in the inside. And I think Michigan will do the exact same thing.
Will Howard has surprised me this year. I was really hard on him coming out. I was kind of poking a lot of fun of him for losing his job at Kansas State. But he's done good. I mean, would you guys agree with that?
He should be getting an invite to the Heisman ceremony at this point.
How is he not, Matt? Like, how is he not consistently at least in the top 10?
Yeah, it's just absurd. It's, you know what it is? It's because they put too much weight on preseason expectations and then the first like 4 or 5 weeks of the season, and then of course the head-to-head. Like, so if Ohio State would have beat Oregon, then Howard might be number one right now, and Gabriel would, you know, because he has better stats than Gabriel, but Gabriel's undefeated and he beat him by 1 point at night. So
He's arguably the most efficient quarterback in the country.
yeah, I mean he has all these 80% games. Like they said, PFF said like the last like month he's been the number one quarterback in the country.
He and Chip Kelly, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Ryan Day, but we know that Chip Kelly is really calling the plays. I think he is the perfect mesh of Chip Kelly as a play caller and Will Howard as a quarterback, because there are things that Will Howard doesn't necessarily do, you know, at a exceptional level. But what he is he is an unbelievable. I equate him to a point guard. Like, the offense is more like a point guard type offense because there are a ton of RPOs. There's a ton of read option. You know, when he's at his best, you're giving him post snap options, and he executes at a high level. And when he makes a mistake, he comes right back because he's a veteran. He's played, you know, he's a 5th-year senior. He's been in big games. Like, this is not too big for him. And, you know, I think to a large extent, the Oregon loss kind of helped him because he's come out and played. He's been a baller. He's been an absolute baller. And now you can tell defenses are trying to take JJ Smith away, but all of a sudden Carnell Tate emerges, and you've still got Emeka Egbuka, and you've still got all these other weapons, and Howard's finding ways to use them. So,
well, Howard played good in the Oregon game. He did. He played very well in that game. But your last memory of him in that is him losing the game, and so and there's a quality win thing. I know Ohio State beat Penn State, but beating James Franklin just isn't that special over the years, you know. Or if you guys had beaten Oregon, I think he would be in the Heisman talk right now. But you guys just haven't beaten anyone that's been super impressive.
I love is that
you can, though, because if you go to the Big Ten championship and beat
Oregon, get him again.
He can, yeah.
We'll get him again.
He can totally make up for it.
There's really nobody there's no team in the country that I'm like, I don't want to play that team. I want to see this team play the best teams. I want to see what kind of run they can go on. But my biggest, honestly, my only anxiety about the rest of this season is we just have to beat Michigan. Just have to beat them.
Yeah,
like that. I can't deal personally.
Team.
Yeah, just because
the 6 and 5 team you're the most worried about.
Yeah, well,
it's because of all the other. It's the PTSD of the last 3 years. You know, it's like what Ryan Day said. Like, outside of losing his dad, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to him. Is losing this game.
Ridiculous comment I've ever heard.
It's not, though. That's how much it matters to people. And I mean, if he loses again, I'm not kidding you. As good as Ryan Day is, I would not be surprised if he gets fired. I'm not even kidding you. Like, if he loses to Michigan a 4th time, he has to win a national title.
Not just
to
Michigan.
Save his job.
That's David Warren, and that in itself is inexcusable.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, I'm not even kidding. I think it's the palate cleanser that everybody needs. Like, everybody in that program needs to beat the shit out of Michigan. They just do.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like,
to set things right.
Won the national title, and if we would have beat Georgia and TCU a couple of years ago, it still wouldn't have. We didn't have the win over Michigan that year, and then Nate would have been like, still couldn't beat us. So
yeah, I mean, CJ Stroud, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, all those guys. None of those guys have gold pants. None of them. It's crazy.
No, wait a minute. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson.
Chris Olave.
I'm sorry, Olave did. Garrett Wilson didn't.
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson.
I don't think he's got a pair of gold pants.
Oh yeah, he did because he was there. I know.
Was he there?
Caught in.
That's right. He didn't play as a freshman though.
Oh yeah, he did.
I thought it was. I know Olave did because Olave blocked the punt. I'm sorry, I got that all messed up. Because Olave did, yes, but Stroud did not. Stroud did not with CJ Stroud because they ducked him. Because they ducked him during the COVID year.
No, it wasn't a duck. It was COVID. There was a COVID
Yeah, my
outbreak.
asshole. Come on.
It happened like
We all
Ohio State
know
had
what
to
happened
cancel
in
a
that,
game
dude.
against Illinois too. Did Ohio State? Have
Yeah,
to
I
cancel
understand
a
that,
game
but they
against Illinois or
could
not?
have scrounged enough guys to play that game. They didn't want to, and they know it. And they tried to screw
No.
Ohio State out of going to the playoff.
I want to
No,
talk
that
about
wasn't it.
two things. I want to get a point spread for this game, or what we think it's going to be the score of this game, and then also just talk a little bit about the playoffs. I don't know if you saw the selection today, the rankings.
I
Yeah.
have not looked at that yet.
Let's go there first, because I was actually, it was funny. I kind of did my own little, 12 team before that ever came out. And after the top 25 on Sunday. And it's funny because I was of the same opinion. I did not see any shot that Alabama is going to be in it. To me, I thought, if anything, the Big Ten's going to have 4 teams in it, because I think Indiana's going to make it.
100%.
And so I think you're going to have Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana are going to make it. Notre Dame's going to make it. You're going to have probably 3 SEC teams. But Tennessee is going to be the last of the SEC teams. And then you're going to end up having a Boise State. You're going to have the Big 12 winner. And then I think the way I thought it would shape up is, looking at it, you're probably going to have 2 ACC teams. And then when the rankings came out, it certainly looks like that. It looks like it's going to be both. If it's SMU and Miami, both those teams will make it.
Bama's ranked 13th.
Yeah, I don't see Alabama making it. Not after that not after the last loss, the way it went down.
Yeah, they're going to
Alabama and Ole Miss 13.
They need
and
to
14.
have what Tennessee has to lose. Vanderbilt has to beat Tennessee. There's a bunch of things that happen. Like, I think, doesn't Texas have to? Does that matter?
Texas would have to lose and I don't even think that's going to. Even if Texas A&M beat Texas is still going to make it.
Well, they will.
But that's weird. That's going to screw things up, because it gets an extra team in, because A&M wouldn't be in otherwise.
I don't think after A&M just lost last week, I don't think they can make it in. I really think you're only going to get 3 SEC teams in. You're going to get.
Listen to this. You're
going to get Texas. You're going to get Georgia, and you're going to get Tennessee.
Yeah, in the top 5, there's only one Southern school. It's Texas, and that's
what's funny? I think this is going to work out really well for Ohio State, because there's, I think, one team that is a really bad matchup for Ohio State, and they're almost assuredly eliminated now, and that's Ole Miss, because they have a really good passing attack, they have a mobile quarterback, and they have defensive linemen that would give us fits. So then is a real.
I honestly, I think the team that we give Ohio State the most trouble is Georgia, because they have an explosive passing attack, and even though Carson Beck will turn the ball over,
their offensive line is garbage.
Yeah, but they're not that bad. I mean, they're not good. They're not good by any means. I'm just saying, like that. And I like I said, there's Matt. Like I was saying earlier, I'm not afraid of any team. I am not afraid of any team with this current Ohio State team led by Will Howard. I think the offensive line is good enough to make it go. The only thing that worries me, the thing that worries me on offense, is the interior offensive line and consistently being able to move people, because the whole offensive line played like crap against Indiana. And they've played, but they haven't played together that long in these positions. And the secondary scares the hell out of me, because I still got PTSD from the Oregon game and past games with this group, that these guys, like, there's talent there, but they're not elite by any means. And if a quarterback can get time, they can be exploited.
Do you think it's better to get the 1 seed or the 5 seed?
I would love. I mean, look, either one is good, right? Because it'd be cool to have a home game, in Columbus in the weather. But at the same point, like, having the bye week and having the number 1 seed, I'll take that too.
Yeah.
Either way.
The
1 seed, 100%.
I want the 1 seed, because that means that Ohio State would have beaten Michigan and would have beaten Oregon. Because I would love nothing more than having Ohio State kick Oregon's ass in a rematch.
Yeah, no, it's just funny. Like, obviously we would prefer to beat Oregon, but matchup wise, it's easier we would have to play Arizona State round 1, and we're favored by 20 against them, and then we would play Boise in round 2, and we would probably be favored by another 15 against them.
So who would the 1 seed get in the?
It would. I sent you guys the text. Let me pull it up. It was what was it?
Well, while Matt's looking for that, I don't know. I think Ohio State is a really good team, and they can go
Georgia versus Pitt.
They can go up against anyone, but man, that offensive line you guys are talking about, like those 2 guys missing, that's one thing.
Oh, it's huge.
Indiana and Michigan. You play Oregon again, you're missing 2 offensive linemen against Oregon. That's going to be rough.
Yep.
It is. It's rough. No, it's definitely rough. The only thing I'll say about that, Nate, is that, at least like Hinsman was the starting center last year, and he had gotten some run at guard before he had to move back over to center. Donovan Jackson's had a couple of games now at left tackle, and Stierveld and Shabola were splitting snaps at right guard. So they've had some playing experience. They just haven't played as a unit, and that is really underrated. I mean, when you've got guys that have some continuity playing together, it really does make a difference. So I would say that I think the more they play together, the better potentially they can play. But this game against Michigan is going to be really telling, because that is the strength of Michigan, and right now it's the weakness of Ohio State on offense.
Well, so it's not just that it's the weakness. How many years do you have to go back to find 2 worse guards than we have that are starting right now for Ohio State?
Yeah, man, it's been a minute. Although I will say, I think they wanted Shabola to be the starting right guard from the beginning this year. I mean, he's still struggling, but he's a young player. I mean, I think there is talent there, and I think Stierveld's got potential, and I thought Hinsman was solid player.
Hinsman, but yeah, the guards though are not.
I just couldn't believe collectively the PFF grades on Ohio State's offensive line against Indiana were awful.
Yeah,
awful. So they got to play better. The one thing I'll say though is, man, I mean, another just to talk about how good Howard's been. That is a tough dude to sack.
Yeah, he's big.
That is a very tough dude to sack.
Yeah, you can't. It's tough.
Like, he's a big boy.
Our offensive line is giving
impossible to sack against him.
Pressure. He should have had probably another dozen sacks, but he's just like shrugging them off. He's like, I mean, he's tough.
He's a tough kid. I mean, he is such an upgrade. I cannot even describe how big of an upgrade he is over Kyle McCord.
Well,
like it is night and day.
Passing this year.
Yeah.
Maybe
like
he would have been just fine in this offense this year, I think. In his second year in the program.
He had a game.
No, he wouldn't have.
He'd have been 3 pick sixes in one game. 3.
He wouldn't have. Yeah, no, he wouldn't have, Nate.
Talent. This is Ohio State.
No, he's not. He's not you needed to have somebody who was a threat who was not only a threat to run, but a threat to throw on the run. And McCord is a true pocket kid. And I'm not crapping on the kid. I think he's a solid quarterback. I think he's done well, but he was not the right fit here. And he was not healthy for most of the year last year either. But yeah. I'm serious. I think that Will Howard is the perfect quarterback for what Chip Kelly is trying to do with this offense, with this team right now. He's the right leader. He's got the right mentality. Like he's the difference maker. He's the glue that makes the offense go.
Yeah, he's basically like JT Barrett, except for he can throw better.
Yeah. I think it's a good way to say it.
Chip Kelly was a big get, and how often do you just go get a former head coach?
Phil O'Brien was supposed to be the coordinator. I don't think he would have been nearly as successful. Super happy that we ended up.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the trust level alone between the relationship and the trust between Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. I mean, they've known each other forever. I mean, Ryan Day played for him, for crying out loud. Like they've known each other for decades, and they are cut from the same cloth. From a style and scheme standpoint, and I mean it's exciting. I really like what they're building. I like the the direction of the program and how they're managing this NIL, era, it seems like you have to, yes, money is important, but you have to sell more than just that. You do have to sell development, and not just as a professional football player, but as a person too. And I think that really is important.
Now that Michigan has popped the cork on spending about $12 million on a single 5-star quarterback, I think we're going to see some serious money being spent.
I applaud what they're doing, but it worries me because, man, to have all your eggs in one basket with one kid. I mean, I can't. I was talking to a kid. I was talking to a kid and his dad who played 2 years of. He was starting quarterback at the biggest high school in this area, and they had a quote unquote college offense. He is playing. He is a freshman at a local small school in Ohio, and this kid said to me, "You would not believe the amount of terminology that we have to learn to run." Like he like I said, he ran a very high level high school offense for 2 years. He said he could not run their college offense the first year, even if he wanted to, because there was so much terminology. He said in the first 5 games of the season, they had not run the same play with the same formation with the same motions more than once. And that's the level of complexity that you've got to pick up. Like, that's just one example of how much harder it is to go from high school to the college, to the big time college level. When you put that much pressure on a kid to be the savior of the program, I hope he's, for the kid's sake, I hope he's got broad enough shoulders to carry that load. But man, that is a lot. I mean, Julian Sayin, it was the number 1 quarterback in the country, and he's barely sniffing the field at Ohio State. He's in a purely developmental position. He's going to be in a far better position than a 5-star who's sitting behind a bunch of guys that everybody in the stadium wants to see the wonder kid. But you can see these kids go into these programs and flame out, and there's no, it's not surprising that these guys jump around to 2 and 3 programs, and it's not till they get to the second or third stop that it really starts to click for them. It's a hard position to play.
What I wanted to know is, I wish that they had like these contracts. It would be nice if they could actually have them like published, so what the details are, as far as like I'm really curious like how much of this is guaranteed. So I can't imagine that it's like NFL where you're guaranteed the 12 million for the for 4 years, whether you even start or not. I would have to imagine the money would be like, okay, you're getting 3 million a year, assuming you're starting each of those years or something. Like, I just can't imagine.
I agree with you, Matt, and it's very murky. It's very, very murky. But I also would say that LSU in particular has real problems with their NIL right now.
Yeah,
and there are a couple of LSU kind of insider guys I've communicated with about it, and they're in real trouble between the weird fit with Brian Kelly and the lack of NIL commitment. They're in a bad way, because Underwood, by all reports, wanted to go to LSU. He did not want to go to Michigan. He was he's made those comments about lack of quarterback development at Michigan publicly, but he's going there not only, and this is no slight to Michigan. I don't blame them one bit for what they've done, but it's not just about Michigan. It's also Michigan taking advantage of LSU being in a bad spot, the same way that Ohio State took advantage of Alabama last year. And no question, Ohio State took advantage of Saban leaving there. So instability at one place, if you've got your ducks in a row, you can definitely pounce.
Yeah, I don't feel bad at all. The South has been paying players for how long?
Yeah.
now.
Oh, no
for the
doubt.
last 50
I'm
years.
believe me, I'm not crying for Brian
Yeah,
Kelly either. He's a horrible human being. So it doesn't bother me one bit. And I can't wait to see, in a perfect world, a Tavian St. Clair or,
Yes.
Julian Sand to Tavian St. Clair versus Underwood for these next few years is going to be fun to watch.
A lot of you see visits, and I wonder if what's his name, Tavion St. Clair.
Yeah.
I'd be going back to Ohio State and saying, hey, this dude Bryce Underwood just got $12 million. Maybe we should talk about what I'm going to be making. Or maybe
Man, it's not even about that. Like they're going to get paid, but the thing is, like, it's not just about what you're getting coming to the school. These kids want to play in the NFL, man. Like
they do.
when you're a top tier high school player, you're thinking about being the next CJ Stroud. So when CJ Stroud and Justin Fields come and talk to you when you go show up on visits, like, that's what it's about. The proof is in the development.
Yeah.
Yes, it's important. If you can get in a situation, I do not blame a kid one bit for taking more in NIL initially. Like the running back kid that went to Miami that wanted to go to Ohio State, like, they gave him generational money to go down there. You can't blame a kid, especially a Florida kid, for staying locally like that. But at the same point, it really is about the league and trying to get to that second contract in the league. And especially at certain positions like quarterback, you better have some serious fundamentals under your belt, or you are going to wash out of the NFL in a hurry. You think Division I is difficult. The NFL is almost impossible to play quarterback at.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Bryce Underwood, either way, however Michigan got him, like, the excitement level right now at Michigan is just really skyrocketed. This year has been so poor. It's been so downtrodden that getting Bryce Underwood has just now officially made us feel a whole heck of a lot better.
And I don't blame you one bit, Nate. Do you think they're going to retain Moore as head coach?
Retain Moore?
Yeah, you think they'll retain him long term?
Yeah, now that they got Underwood, I think they do.
For sure.
It didn't seem like they were overly committed to him after this whole deal. Are they still
Hold on there. We got a comment here. Michigan super chat. Michigan will own recruiting for years. They have the second richest man in the world, 50 million any year committed to NIL money. Trumps almost everything. Yeah, what's that guy's name? The Oracle.
Larry He's worth $200.
Yeah, Larry Ellison.
Here's the thing, though, man. How did that work out for Texas A&M? Like, I don't buy. I literally, not to make a pun, but I don't buy that. I don't buy that one bit. Yeah, you have to have money committed, but you better develop guys and get them in the NFL. And the guy that largely was responsible for developing, or at least recruiting and developing, the program that sent guys like Aiden Hutchinson to the NFL is gone in Harbaugh. Now, Sharon Moore, he's starting his legacy there, and he can certainly point to the offensive line and their success, but they got a long way to go to prove that they're consistently putting out first and second round guys. Like, it's really important. The last couple of years have been great for them, but you have to have sustained development to really be elite in the way that Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State have been consistently in the top 3 to 5 in recruiting every single year in the last 10 years. Yeah, it's not just about money.
That, but Ohio State went from losing to Missouri and then spending the $20 million granted on the new guys
that game
and the guys to retain, and it's working.
Missouri meant nothing. Missouri meant nothing to anybody in that program.
It was still nothing. A bad loss.
You guys winning the national title is why we spent the money.
Absolutely. The losing to Michigan is why all those guys came back. Yeah. And the thing is, like, that's what you're going to find out the hard way is it costs money not just to get recruits. You have to maintain the roster you have. And you have to convince guys that they're better off staying than even if they're a second or third team guy, especially in a 12-team playoff situation. You got to convince guys down the roster to stay, that they're going to get opportunities to get developed and play on a team rather than go and be a starter for a team that might make the playoff. Like that's a hard thing I think it's going to be much harder in the NIL era now to maintain depth than it is to get recruits. And at that point, like you guys should appreciate more than anybody the difference between when you're playing 22 and 23-year-old guys against 18 and 19-year-olds. Like the physical maturity of your team last year. Oh my God, you had so many guys that were 4th, 5th, 6th-year players that are grown-ass men that were playing on that team that were in the 2 deep. That's really hard to maintain guys in the program that long. It's going to cost you.
Yeah, very true. And Brian, thanks for the other super chat. Here's the point, and I agree. The point is talent will no longer be an issue. If anything, no one will be able to compete with Michigan's NIL. And see that has been
okay, but so, dude, look at what Oregon's just done. I disagree with that. There are plenty of programs that are spending money. Like, you know, it's about return on investment. Like it did not work out well for Texas A&M. You know, when Jimbo Fisher got fired, they did not win with that roster that they spent. They set records for how much they spent on that one recruiting class. Oregon, Phil Knight wants to see a championship in Oregon before he dies. Like that dude is going to spend whatever it takes. Like it's not true. You can have all the money, like even in professional sports, you can have all the money. There are teams in sports that don't even have a salary cap. Just because you spend money doesn't mean you're going to win. You still have to put a program together. You have to put a team together. You have to coach them up. You have to develop the guys. You have to have a shit ton of luck, you know, a lot of luck to win. And it's
how many World Series should the Yankees have had if it was just about
right
players?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the Dodgers, occasionally the Dodgers win one, you know what I mean? But it's not a guarantee. And look, I'm not, none of that is to take a shot at Michigan. I applaud them because a couple years ago, it sounded like their NIL was in crisis. You know, that was a program that was teetering on the verge of collapse. And what Harbaugh did with or without the help of Stallions is still, it's remarkable, you know, and they had the blueprint they had a team that had been in the playoffs. They had started to have success, but it was the decision of all those guys to come back for one last shot. And they had an absolutely loaded, veteran-led team that won a national championship. And that is hard to replicate. Yeah. Money alone is not going to do that.
You're right. 100% true. Another comment by Brian. Thanks, man. Larry Ellison, $233 billion. Phil Knight, $33 billion.
I address this really quick. So here's the difference. Obviously, if Larry Ellison wanted to, Michigan would be unstoppable, assuming that Elon Musk didn't get involved. Now, the difference is it's not about who has the most money. It's who's going to spend the most of their money. Because, for instance, Larry Ellison, I don't think, is doing this for himself. He's doing it for his girlfriend, who is a Michigan fan. He's not the Michigan fan. I think it's his wife. His wife is the Michigan fan. So, I mean, granted, I'm guessing
that seems like it could be even more.
Yeah, so it could.
Your wife wants that,
but that's still like a difference between Phil Knight, who doesn't have nearly as much money, but you know he really wants to spend this money to get it before he dies. So it's more urgent.
And they went out and got an outstanding coach in Dan Lanning, right? I think there are very few elite guys. I think Harbaugh is, as weird as that dude is, he's an elite coach. You cannot dispute the guy turns around programs, right? And I'll give you this example. If Ellison went out, or Portnoy or any of these guys went out and bought a quarterback for whatever, $10 million and shoved him in Harbaugh's face and said, "You're starting this guy." And Harbaugh went through spring ball and was like, "This kid is trash. The best player on my team is the walk-on." Harbaugh has the stones and the clout to say, "I'm playing who I think is going to give me the best chance to win. Screw the boosters and screw the money." There are not very many. Sharon Moore is not in that position. He does not have the skins on the wall to pull that off. There are plenty of that's what I'm talking about, having the culture that is strong enough to take that on to when you have, like, let's say, I think Saban was even struggling with this at Alabama, where you talk about like an offensive line where the offensive tackle who's getting the biggest NIL money is not as good as his backup. Saban's going to play the better player, and the more expensive guy's butt hurt, and he's going to transfer. Like, not only do you have to make that tough call, but then to be able to potentially hold on to the depth, hold on to those guys that might transfer. It's more difficult than just throwing money at it. Money alone, you need the money. I'm not saying that you don't. You'd much rather have the money than not have the money, but you need to have the system in place, the culture in place that can almost in some cases, I think, overcome the money, because the money can create problems.
Yeah,
very true. Very true.
I think one of the hardest parts about managing a roster today would probably be, let's say you're getting, since let's say you have, I don't know how often they, after the year, because you have a certain amount of money that's allocated towards new recruits coming in. So there's probably a bunch of legacy players that have been there for a while. And then you have like this new recruit. Okay, there's receiver, JJ Smith, supposed to be this hot thing. He's not played a down a ball, and he's making $800,000, probably more than anyone else on the team. And then, so then you have people that are like, okay, well, I've been here for 3 years, and I'm a starter. I'm an all Big Ten. Like, how much am I worth? I want more money. So then it just becomes like, how do you have like the money to be able to deal with all this stuff and keeping people happy and keeping there? I mean, obviously, I'm guessing it's can be much harder on a team not like Ohio State. Like, let's say you're on a team that's not going to be, developing people for the NFL, and maybe they're not known for, making to the playoffs every year. Those other teams are going to have a real hard time, keep any kind of continuity on their roster.
And Nate, I mean, I think the one of the things that I thought Harbaugh did really well, he didn't recruit at an elite level. They never had classes that were like unbelievable, but they were fantastic in the portal. Like, they kicked ass in the portal. They went out, especially on the lines, especially the offensive line. They went out and got grown ass men in the freaking transfer portal and played hard nosed, kick your ass football. Like, that was impressive. That not only did they go out and get veteran guys that had played on other teams, but they decided when everybody else was going spread up tempo, they're like, nah, we're going to go 13 personnel and we're going to take the air out of the ball. And like, I mean, from a schematic standpoint and from a roster management standpoint, I thought they did amazing work. But let's not act like they were out there. They weren't recruiting like Alabama was.
But they did have a 5-star quarterback.
They did have a 5-star quarterback that wanted to go to Ohio State, and Ohio State took Kyle McCord instead.
But they still had him. That's the thing.
No, they did.
That's something Harbaugh didn't have prior to 2021.
Brian's comment here real quick.
Yeah, and we do, like, because it's kind of feeds into this too. Hey, thanks, Brian. 2023 Michigan would be favored over every team this year.
I disagree.
This is the biggest down year in college football.
I think last year was.
Yeah,
I
don't know.
Last year was pretty bad.
3 losses. I think Alabama.
Well, because I think Georgia from 2 years ago would have been favored over Michigan. 23, 22. Georgia would have been favored.
Maybe 22. But not 2023. 23 versus 24.
We almost
no. Yeah, I mean, look, we're in a different era.
Offensive line, and we almost beat you guys. Our team is way better this year.
No, Michigan.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. I mean, I think this. Even if Michigan would have been favored, I still think Ohio State's roster and team this year is better than last year. I don't think you can even argue that. I mean, Caleb Downs alone you cannot underestimate how much of an impact that kid has had. And unfortunately, McLaughlin, to me, was the best offensive lineman on the team.
We beat both those guys last year when Saban was their coach.
Yeah, but the rest of that team was garbage, and you know that. Saban knew it too. Saban was on the way out the door.
They beat last year's Georgia and won the SEC championship. So I think
Nate, I'm not taking anything away from 23 Michigan. It doesn't matter. You guys won last year. I've said all along, even if there's sanctions that are handed down, they're not going to take the championships away from Michigan. No. And I've said the same, said to you guys on the show, like, I don't blame Michigan fans if you would have said, sell your soul for a national title, even if you're not relevant for 10 more years, you'd do it in a heartbeat. And
most people would.
And so would Ohio State fans. Like, it's not even a thing. Like, there's no reason to even compare.
Yeah, because it's been 10 years since Ohio State's won a national title.
It has. It's crazy. Title. It doesn't seem like it's that long, but it's an eternity.
Yeah, it's hard.
That was the first college playoff, and now we're in a different era with the 12 team. And you've said it. You've said it a couple times tonight that, like, depth is really what is going to. It is going to be the difference maker. It's the biggest thing in the NFL. Key injuries can completely derail your season, and you have to maintain depth, and that is going to be the story of how these teams.
Oh, did we lose Brian? Oh, no, we can't lose Brian before he gives us his score prediction.
Yeah, but to continue, I'll piggyback on his comment.
Hopefully no, I'm still here.
Oh, you're here?
Oh, sounded like you cut out there.
No, I'm still here.
Okay,
yeah,
awesome.
I was just going to say, like, the depth-wise, I mean, God, like, our defensive line depth is ridiculous. Our linebacker depth is ridiculous. Our safety depth is really good. We have the two best safeties in the country, and it's not even close. Georgia has good safeties, but I mean, ours are just. I mean, Ransom is just on fire, and he's supposed to be the lesser known of the two safeties, and he's just out there making plays left and right. But you see that fumble he forced? I mean, Indiana got it back, but I mean, wow, what a play he made! I mean, and he's been like that all year. He's just been unbelievable. Wow.
Well, the crazy thing, Matt. The crazy thing is that and you said this on that very first show that who would have thought that going into the season that as much as highly rated as Ohio State's team is, that Michigan has the higher end talent of the two teams. The two best players on the two highest drafted players on Ohio State's team right now, if they were eligible to go in the draft, would be J.J. Smith and Caleb Downs. Hands down. They both be top 10 picks. And one's a freshman and one's a sophomore.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, who's going
hands
in the first
down
round for Ohio State this year?
Our top pick.
Nobody else.
Our top pick.
Nobody else.
Simmons, and he's hurt and he's out for the year.
No.
2025, no first round picks for Ohio State in 2025.
2020, yeah, this draft coming up, I've been saying it.
I saw Mecca and Simmons.
I've been saying it. I don't think there's a first round pick that is draft eligible on this team. The only one that's close to me is Egbuka.
Yeah.
Egbuka.
I don't think the running backs will go, and I don't think there's anybody on the defense will go in the first round.
Brian, here's another one from Super Chat from Brian. Not you, Brian. Another Brian. How no one is elite this year. Name the elite teams. Y'all are crazy. Bama, Georgia, all the typical teams were better last year. It's true. I mean, Georgia, what? Georgia has 2 losses this year, right? Bama has 3 losses.
What I'm saying is it's a point that's all well and good. No one's arguing that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Michigan 2024 is not in this playoff. So I mean I appreciate that. It's not. It doesn't have any impact on this season. Like, we're all playing what we got to play with this year. My point is that Michigan won the title last year. They were a really, really good football team. They all came back and mission accomplished. And they showed the blueprint to the Ohio State roster for what you want to do. The mission was to come back, and the very first thing you have to do is beat Michigan to have that happen. They had to beat Ohio State, and they did it. And so, I take my hat off to that team. Michigan did what they had to do. They ran through the schedule that they had, and they took care of business, and they won a national title. And I wouldn't feel badly at all if I were a Michigan fan about that.
No,
but it really doesn't matter because, it's hard. It's really, really hard in a 12-team playoff era, in the NIL era the way it is right now, to hold your team together the way that Michigan did. And I think that's a testament to Harbaugh. And Harbaugh's gone. So, it does make a difference. I think you do have to have some strong leadership at the top of your program to be able to hold on to the depth. And you do have to have NIL support. There's no question about that.
Yeah,
I think
you know
20
what?
million is the going rate. That's what Ryan Day was basically saying.
Ohio State is actually better than they were last year. That's 100% true.
Definitely.
But if you think last year at this time, we had 3 undefeated teams. We had Georgia, we had Michigan, we had Ohio State, all undefeated. So I can see why people would say, after looking at all of the losses and looking at that top 25, why you would look at last year and this year and say, this year is even more down than last year. Ohio State's not more down than last year, even if they do have one loss, because they had to go play at Oregon. The schedules for everyone is just completely different this year because of all of the changing of the schedules and
the conferences.
At Oklahoma coming into the SEC.
The conferences.
Realignment.
I think you almost have to say though, like I guess my only point. I'm not trying to minimize Brian's comment or anybody else's. My only thing is, I think this is a different era now because of the conference realignment, the lack of divisions, you shouldn't be afraid to play quality games out of schedule now because you can survive a loss or two and still make the playoff. But it's with a 12-team playoff and the NIL era the way it is, the Wild West with roster management out here, it's just a different era. It's going to be very, very difficult. I think we're going to be looking ahead in a couple of years at an even more watered down picture of what this playoff can be. I mean, you're still going to have the same. I'm not saying you're going to go and all of a sudden have 10 teams that have a legitimate shot of winning a title, but it's more than 3 or 4. And I still think even with 12 teams this year, there's only really 3, maybe 4 teams that have a chance of winning it. Very
true. Oh, and yeah, thanks, Brian. Washington was undefeated last year too at this time,
and we all knew that they were fraudulent. And when they played Oregon twice in 2 really, really close games. I still don't think Oregon's that good, but I think Oregon this year is better than they were last year. And even with Bo Nix, as good as he's been, as he was last year, I think they're a more complete team this year. And Washington escaped 2 close games with them to stay undefeated, but everybody knew that Michigan was going to kick the shit out of them physically, and they did. Once they got past Bama, they had the championship.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is also, it's so much of the playoffs and everything else, it's about matchups. So last year, 2 things. So in the Texas versus Washington matchup, it was so lucky that Michigan didn't get Texas at all in the playoff because Texas is the team that matched up perfectly with you guys. They have a good run defense, and Washington did not have a good run defense. And Washington's strength was their receivers, and then your strength was your pass defense. So it was just like the perfect storm where you got like this amazing matchup. Whereas and it was like a miracle win. Like that Washington beating Texas was so lucky. Like Penix made so many ridiculous throws to barely win that game. I mean, it was crazy.
That was their whole season, Matt. But you're 100% right. I mean, styles make fights, and I think that's going to be the case this year too. When you get into the playoff, it really will be a styles makes fights kind of a deal. Not early on. I don't think those matchups will be particularly interesting. Although I can't wait to see some Southern teams have to come north and play in conditions. But it'll be. I think there is going to be a lot of that. And
I wish Georgia was ranked a little bit lower so they could have had wouldn't get that home game for their first round, which they're probably going to get, unless they lose to Georgia Tech somehow.
Or or what I suppose, and then whatever happens in the SEC championship game again. But I mean, Texas is one of those teams too. Texas, they haven't played anybody. They haven't beaten anybody. They've not beaten anybody that's been ranked. So
they have no business being ranked 3. I mean, it doesn't make
no.
Why are they ranked so high?
Well, they're 10-1.
It's just because they beat
so is
Michigan.
Indiana,
and because the other teams are Penn State, Notre Dame, Miami, Florida.
No,
Those are the other 10-1 teams.
All of those other teams have had ranked wins.
yeah.
Texas is
saying we should do a call-in show. he needs to speak. But let me get one in from Brian here on Oregon, because I was thinking this also while we were chatting and about Oregon. They're a totally different team this year. Here's Brian says, Oregon was way better last year. This Oregon team barely beat 3 garbage teams.
Look, they could very well be. I think that the worst part about last year for Oregon was that Dan Lanning, especially in the first game when they played Washington, they should have beaten Washington. His coaching cost them that game.
Yep.
His coaching cost them that game last year, where he was too aggressive. Yep. And I like Lanning, but there's occasionally you got to dial it back a little bit. And I love that Ryan Day is an aggressive coach, but occasionally you got to be smart. And I thought that his inexperience really caught up to him, especially in that first game. But the point was like we were saying, I think once you knew that Washington was in the championship, or in the playoff, they were probably the weakest overall team of the 4 teams. And they were very lucky to get out of the Texas game. And everybody knew it was almost like when Ohio State beat Alabama in 2014. Like, I had no doubts that they were going to beat Oregon for the championship game. Like, there was no way because they were all flash and they weren't physical up front.
Very true. Like last year, the national title game was Michigan versus Bama.
No doubt.
It was.
And realistically, Nate, it was Michigan against Ohio State.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that wasn't even. They were both.
I think Ohio State could have won the whole. Ohio State could have won the whole thing last year if they could have just beaten Michigan. Like, I'm not even kidding. If we had competent quarterback play, Ohio State very likely could have won the national title last year, and they certainly could have the year before that.
I've been saying that not just this year. If we had competent quarterback play, but for most of Harbaugh's career. Like, he got J.J. McCarthy, and let's not forget about
Brady Hoke's career and Rich Rod's career. It goes back.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so important. That's why I don't know if Bryce Underwood's worth $12 million, but the one thing is not going to go in without an awesome quarterback.
The one thing I loved about
Ryan Day.
The one thing I liked about what Harbaugh did with J.J. McCarthy was they started getting him in games early in his career.
Yep.
Like, he was a package player as a freshman, basically. Was that his red shirt freshman year? I can't remember if he was a true freshman, but he was playing early as a package player.
Yep. Very smart. And
it is smart. It's important to get those guys real snaps. And that is a gripe of mine. I think that Ohio State, Ryan Day mismanaged Quinn Ewers when he was here in particular, although I will give him some credit, because Quinn Ewers should have been a high school senior when he was at Columbus. He was only there because of the NIL bullshit in Texas. The high school
couldn't get it until he was 18 or something like that. So he
couldn't get his money because they wouldn't let high school kids have any kind of NIL at the time. And so he had a supposedly $1 million deal, and he wanted to take it. And I don't blame him. But in order to do that, he changed his enrollment year, and he ended up coming in as an early enrollee at Ohio State. But he was a 17-year-old kid, who was homesick as can be because he was a superstar in Texas. And there were still opportunities. I mean, the kid had talent, and there were opportunities to get him in, and instead they gave it to McCord and who's the kid who went to Florida? God, I can't remember that kid's name. But they have not done as good of a job consistently as Michigan did with J.J. McCarthy getting him in early. And I thought that's a testament to the plan to develop McCarthy. And McCarthy turned into a hell of a quarterback. I mean, for what they needed and what he did it extremely well. And, I just, like I said, I give them a lot of credit because they were zigging when everybody else was zagging. I mean, when everybody was doing, spread up tempo, stuff. They went to the old school. Like, I mean, if they could have run wing T, they would have, I mean, they were
Yeah,
going
and you know
back to
what?
old school, take the air out of the ball football.
Yeah, that's a great point, because also it proves you can't run even a quaint offense without a top quarterback. I mean,
No,
it seems like Sharon Moore almost thought like he could just be like, "Hey, this is our offense and it's proven, and we can just go throw anybody out there at quarterback and do this." And you absolutely cannot do that.
well,
I
I
mean,
think too. I mean, I don't know. You know the program a lot more than I do, Nate. But certainly from the outside, it seemed like there was so much turmoil at the beginning of
yeah,
this. From the time that they won that championship, and the speculation of whether Harbaugh was finally going to go to the pros, and when he finally made the decision to go to the Chargers, he took, really the best assistant coaches out of that program.
true.
There was so much uncertainty about what was going to happen. It's awfully hard. And you knew that so many leaders and veteran guys were leaving that program. I think it's really hard for any coach to hold on and have a solid foundation for the next year without a succession plan that was more clear. And
Oh,
that it was a hot mess. And I think Moore, and Moore didn't really, it seemed like he didn't really have the full backing of the administration either. And certainly the NIL wasn't 100% behind him. So, he may have been just making lemonade out of lemons the best he could. But I definitely agree with you that they should have had a better plan, or at least a better sense of what they had on the roster than they did.
doesn't sound like Harbaugh had it. Maybe he just didn't even care. He'd been trying to get out for the last 3 years to go to.
No doubt.
I mean,
Yeah, but
he was just trying to
we're
get
talking
the hell
about
out.
not getting a quarterback in the portal, though, Nate. They could have got
Oh yeah,
any decent.
still should have done that.
Portal.
Yeah,
Because they've done well in the portal the last couple of years. I mean, they've been fantastic in the portal.
But you know what? This could have been cause and effect too. I mean, now that all of the top Michigan donors, everyone who just got used to winning a national, beating Ohio State for 3 years, saw the team that came out this year, that may have fired them up.
You would hope. You would definitely hope. And look, that is one thing, Nate, that I would have a lot of confidence just based on the way things are going, that I think you're going to see more and more and more and more and more quarterbacks come out of the portal. And you're dumb if you don't have a veteran guy that you don't go get out of the portal, and you have some 5-star kid, waiting in the wings. You have to do both. And
who's might be coming out of the portal now is Quinn Ewers. I just saw an article right before we came on here that Quinn, it's a possibility he could come out and leave Texas.
He's going to the pros, man. There's no way he's going to the pros.
You would
he's
think.
Potentially hurt too right now. We don't know what the injury issue is. But what I was going to say is the interesting thing is, assuming you can't do both. So what is it better to just say, okay, I'm going to spend my $10 million in the portal on, or actually, no, it would just be $3 million in the portal on getting a Jaden Daniels to transfer from Arizona State, or a Bo Nix to transfer from Auburn, and I'm just going to pay them $3 million instead of spending $3 million on a unproven guy from high school.
That's what I would do, because look at the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country, Matt.
Yeah.
Do you think either one of those guys are elite NFL quarterbacks? I don't.
Nope.
But Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard are awesome college quarterbacks.
Well, the top 7, you look at all those teams, and they've all got basically senior quarterbacks.
Yep.
And a lot of them transferred.
Most of them transferred,
except for Texas and Penn State.
Most of them transferred. And what's crazy is again, another funny story about like how these quarterbacks are doing this now. One of the guy, there's a guy who's playing at a small college in Ohio who was Michael Penix's backup at Washington. He's starting at a small school here. He is going to, and I think the kid's like 22 or 23 years old. He's got a wife and a kid. So, I mean, but he's going to transfer to a top D1 school. And that's what these guys are doing. They're either coming from a smaller D1 school, or if they've got to take a step back to get playing time, they're moving around. And that is a position that you have to have experience. It's really hard to play that position at a high level, and you either get them, especially when you're a blue blood program that's expected to compete year in and year out, man, turning the reins over to a true freshman or even a redshirt freshman is hard. So, you see the pattern. The pattern is go out and get a veteran guy who's played a lot of snaps. And then those guys, look at what Bo Nix is doing in the pros. Some of those guys, Jaden Daniels, these guys who end up having success even at the pro level. They played a lot of snaps because that position is just really hard. You've got to play it. And it actually helps you to play in several different offenses.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought Bo Nix would be good in the pros, and right now he's as hot as anybody. So it's crazy. But what I was going to ask you too is, so what about next year? So we have Sayin, is going to be a sophomore, and then we have St. Clair coming in. Now St. Clair is different because he came from a really small school in Ohio.
Yeah, he won't play next year.
Most likely he won't play. So are we gonna risk everything on a sophomore, or are we going to also bring in another 1-year stopgap to compete?
Well, as much as it pains me to say it, you still have Devin Brown here, and I don't think Keenholz will ever play here, but they've got, Sayin certainly seems like the kid. I mean, when Ryan Day comes out and says this kid's going to play a lot of snaps at Ohio State, you have to imagine that he's next in the succession plan.
I think.
Well, guys, there's also Aaron Noland too, right?
Well, Aaron Noland is there, and he's the one no one ever talks about. Yeah. And he's a talented kid too. But again, I think he's a developmental kid. I think he's a kid who's got a lot of talent, but he's got to get himself on the field. And right now, the pecking order has been Devin Brown and Julian Sayin.
Yeah.
So, I don't think Ohio State's going to go into the portal. I think they'll be one of the few teams that won't, just because of what they have in the room already.
Unless Devin Brown and Lincoln Keenholz both leave.
Yeah, and I could even see Devin Brown. Even if Devin Brown left, you'd still have Julian Sayin and Aaron Noland and Keenholz and
too. Like, who knows? Like.
And Tavian St. Clair. I mean, you're going to have 4 legit young guys, but even if Devin Brown left, I don't think they're going to go into the portal. But I do think that you could see it. If I were Michigan, I would 100% go in the portal. There are going to be very few teams. I think Penn State's obviously got Drew Aller, and depending on what else. But look at a team like Oregon. I mean, granted, Dante Moore's transferred there from UCLA, and he's sitting there behind Dylan Gabriel, but he's been up and down in his career so far. There's a lot of kids like that are, that their first experiences of playing aren't always positive. And that
Dante Moore, like he's getting that much money to be the backup at Oregon, whereas he would have been like a guaranteed starter at Michigan had Michigan actually gave him.
I don't know. It's crazy to me too, because his dad is a huge Michigan fan, but I don't know what happened in his recruitment, but he never even really entertained Michigan as far as I know, or at least it wasn't that close.
Harbaugh turned some guys off. I know that
no doubt.
He turned off Bryce Underwood. Like he didn't have a good relationship with Underwood either. And I think Underwood was miffed about that. So they had to pull out all the stops to get him. They had some mending offenses just to get that back, for sure.
Well, and that's that whole thing of having that track record of development and having, showing guys that there's a pathway forward. And that's almost more important than anything else to them. I mean, yeah, you want to be able to set yourself up. You're not going to say no to stupid money, but I think there is still an idea that these kids ultimately want to be developed and be successful at the college level, but their eyes are on the NFL prize.
Yeah, their eyes are on the NFL prize, but it's also a pretty dangerous game. So a lot of these kids are probably being told by their parents, take the money now because you don't know if it's going to be there in 3 years, in 4 years. That's a long time.
It is. I mean, and you can be hurt. You can be hurt in practice,
To go to the NFL.
Yeah, and that time is short. I mean, it's the your time to be able to play that sport in particular is very short. And so it's,
For sure.
I don't blame a kid. I never blame a kid if they want to take NIL money.
No.
You know, when you've got late flips and, you know, we're approaching signing day and there's all kinds of weird stuff that goes on. And I never blame a kid for decommitting, especially if they're coming, you know, from halfway across the country. But it's just be wary, because, you know, putting all of your resources into one kid, it's similar to pro sports where you get too much money in one guy and he doesn't pan out, man. It's rough.
Thankfully, with Bryce Underwood, it was a separate deal. Like the regular old NIL money, not a lot of that went to Underwood. A lot of that came from billionaires and Barstool Sports and, you know, that kind of thing. So that was special.
And it sounds like their commitment is to quarterbacks plural, which is important because you have to have a quarterback room. You know, it's really important to get. I was listening to an interview with Alex Smith recently where they were talking about how much credit Patrick Mahomes gives to him for his development, and, you know, the fact that he was a stable pro that taught Mahomes not only how to be an NFL quarterback, but how to be a professional at that level from a personal standpoint. And Alex Smith had said when he got to San Francisco, there was none of that for him. You know, there was no experience in the quarterback room, and that's why he struggled. And it makes a huge difference when you've got good coaches, you got good assistant, you know, good, not just good head coaches, but good offensive coordinator, good quarterbacks coach, you know, good veteran guys that can show you how to do it. It's really important, and it's for the development of that position in particular. And there is no team that is you're not going to contend for a national title without a quarterback.
Yeah. Just not going.
You just aren't.
And you know what? Speaking of having great coaching, like you just mentioned, it occurred to me earlier this week. Jesse Minter is apparently going to be a head coach of an NFL team next year.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me one bit. What's crazy to me is I was at UC. This is dating myself, but I was at UC when his dad was the head coach. Rick Minter was the head coach at UC, and on his staff, he had Rex Ryan, John Harbaugh, and Mike Tomlin.
Wow.
Loaded.
Oh my gosh.
Loaded. Yeah. So, I mean, that kid has grown up in it. And, you know, those kids that have been around that, and good for, I mean, like the other thing that we didn't talk about that I give Harbaugh a lot, we have talked about it in the past, we haven't talked about it tonight, but that I give Jim Harbaugh a lot of credit for is he went to his brother and they put their heads together. And between the Ravens and Michigan, you know, they used Michigan as a farm system for their coaches as well. So McDonald and Minter, you know, a lot of these guys had experience both ways, both at Michigan and for the Ravens. So, you know, they adopted a lot of ideas that were being used both ways, both at the collegiate level and in the pros, to make both programs better, both the Ravens organization and Michigan's program. So not many coaches have that type of leverage, relationship they can leverage directly like that.
Well, yeah. And you mentioned McDonald. McDonald is also a head football coach for,
he's at Seattle. He's coaching Seattle right now. He took over. He was the successor. He was the handpicked successor of Pete Carroll.
Yeah, the 3-year span, like 21 through 23, where Michigan beat Ohio State. Michigan had an NFL head coach at defensive coordinator for all 3 of those years.
Nate,
so
the upgrade when they fired Don Brown.
Oh my gosh,
the upgrade. You know, well, and that's what I said to me
about your offense not doing as good against those guys.
Yeah,
it's probably more along the lines of coaching, like elite coaching. I would imagine, if
no doubt. Well, and they clearly had good talent too, but you got to have both, right? And the difference between and maybe a little help from Stallions too, but hey, still good coaching regardless. Those guys are
not as much.
Those guys are really good, regardless of whatever happens with that. Minter and McDonald were very, very good coaches. You cannot take anything away from them. They are excellent, excellent, excellent coaches. And, you know, I think Minter, you know, when you hear people in the NFL talk about Minter, they talk about him the way that people used to talk about Sean McVay when he was coming up. Like he's that level of a brilliant mind, and no question. And that's what I think. To me, what'll be wild. What I don't know enough about Martindale and his style, but I am fascinated to see what Michigan decides to do defensively against Ohio State, because one of the things, especially with like Johnson not playing, what do they do in coverage? Because teams have tried to do a few different things. And I actually think what Indiana tried to do, like from a strategically, is how I would attack Ohio State. And that is like, I'm putting two safeties back. I'm going to make sure I roll coverage to Jeremiah Smith, and I'm going to make you run the ball on me. I'm going to make you grind drives. And because there's just no good way, you do not want to get beat deep. And I'm just going to make you take shots with Tate and Egbuka against zone coverage, because if you play man against Ohio State, you're going to get absolutely destroyed.
Well, Michigan could afford to allow Ohio State to move the ball between the 20s in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Because Ohio State was not great in the red zone. But now they don't have that luxury. You can't just play off and say, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr., feel free to catch that 15-yard pass. If you let them get all the way down to the red zone this year, Ohio State, they're gonna score. They can't use that strategy this year, so it's difficult. Excuse me.
All right, I gotta go. Dude, let's get some predictions here.
Yep, you go first, Matt.
I was gonna say, like, the one bet, if I was gonna gamble on this game, the one thing that I would definitely do, 20 points sounds like a lot, but whatever the spread is for the first half, I would definitely take the under on that, because Ohio State generally doesn't do well scoring in the first half, but the defense, we usually give up a first drive or two, and then that's about it. And then, so I'm guessing whatever the under is, it's gonna be pretty low the first half. Hopefully we can, figure it out and start a little bit faster than we have been recently. But I really think that just like the talent is just going to eventually wear them out. Our defense has just been doing so much better since Knowles has unleashed the last month, and it's just been, I think, one of the big, really, like, my only concern really is somehow the Michigan defensive line is gonna make a couple big plays with sacks, like with downs, and maybe that's the only way they score, because I don't think their offense is going to be able to score much, but defensively they might get some scores and might have a big play on special teams or something. But our offense, I just think it's going to be tough running. I think find a way to get Travion outside, because running in the middle is going to be possible, I would guess. So, swing passes the outside, running wide, and then, just Howard, just those intermediate passes of his, he's just been so good at it. And if he can actually hit balls to go along with that, I mean, I think that, Ryan Day might be a little bit more aggressive, actually really take some more shots. At the beginning of the year, he was pretty weak on his deep ball. That lately too, like, just everything better, and wants to really pour it on and make up for some of these previous losses. I think once they realize that they've lost, that Michigan has lost this game, I think just like against Indiana at the end of the game, I think he's just going to put pour on a couple extra at the end and just keep the starters in and keep grinding them. So I think it's going to, I don't know what the total spread is, but I'm guessing it's going to be something like, let's see, maybe.
You said all that and you don't have a number?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are probably going to get like 4 field goals, so at least, right? And
We're gonna get that close to we're gonna get in the red zone that many times.
your field goal kicker can kick like 55 yarders in his sleep. So, I mean, I'm guessing you're going to get like 4 field goals, and I even think that they'll find a way, maybe even a defensive touchdown or something crazy. So, either defense, maybe like last year where the defense puts them in a good position to get a short score. So I'm guessing, maybe like 19 points for you guys. Yeah, I'm going with 19 for Michigan, and
that's bold.
But I think Ohio State's going to get like 38. So 38-19. So we're not going to cover the spread, but it'll be close.
Interesting. Not going to cover the spread, but Michigan's going to score 19 points.
A lot of defensive touchdown, and then
you just scored 50 on Northwestern, right?
Yeah. I don't think we're getting a defensive touchdown, but 50 on Northwestern. Yeah, we turned a corner, guys. That's funny. Go after
that was wild.
Go ahead.
I wasn't expecting that. I thought the body blow theory, it's always that. Used to hear that about teams that would play like Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State or something like that, or even Michigan the last couple of years. The body blow after you play them. I do think Northwestern was spent quite a lot of energy trying to stay with Ohio State in that game, but geez, 50 point they get pasted like that wasn't great. I just don't know what the weather's going to be like. That's the only thing that worries me, because if the weather really is bad and it limits the ability to throw, I am very skeptical that Ohio State will be able to run with the running backs between the tackles. Just the way that this offensive line wasn't moving people in the Indiana game. Michigan's still got a really, really good front. And like Matt said, I think I was absolutely spot on, Matt, that the way that Ohio State started slowly and the goofiness of just the way things go and how tight they usually are in big games. And how much they have riding on this, that there's every reason to think that they don't start very well, but that defense just chokes you out. And at some point, the one thing that's been consistent with Ryan Day teams is there's always been that kind of what I call like the avalanche quarter, where it's like nothing happens, and all of a sudden they put like 20, 21 on you in one quarter. And that could certainly happen, especially in the third quarter coming out of half. But a lot of that's how much belief Michigan can have. If you give them the chance to believe that they have a chance to play in that game, then they can hang with them. And that reminds me of that win a couple years ago that Michigan had, where they were definitely not the favorite, but they hit a couple shots early, and it gave them belief. And but again, I just think 21 points is a lot. And if the weather's bad, I just don't see us scoring 35 or 40 points. Maybe I'd be happy to be wrong, but go ahead.
I thought it was just supposed to be cold. I didn't think we're supposed to get any snow or anything, are we?
I don't know. They were talking about polar vortex and like some winds and stuff like that. So I don't know, but any bad weather is going to help Michigan. No question about that. But I still think, they'll figure it out. They should win this game. I just see it like more like, I don't know, these games are always ugly. So I tend to think it's probably, I don't know, 24-13 or something. Like it's not going to be as blown out. I'd love to see it, Matt, where they just, like you said, they just pour it on them late. And maybe it's like Indiana, where it looks more impressive than it kind of was, but and that's 38-15 type of result I'd be happy with that, but I don't care. I just want to see a win. So like I said, I think there's every reason to think it's lower scoring, but let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy with 1 point win. I don't care.
What was your score prediction again, Brian?
I think I said 24-13.
24-13. Okay, that was close to what I was going to do. It's going to be 15 degrees at 8 a.m. On Saturday. So it's going to be 20 degrees probably at kickoff, I would imagine. And if there's
we
wind,
haven't played anything like that cold of a game yet this year. Like nothing close. So it'll be some adjustment.
Even if it does stay close, my prediction is it's not ever going to feel like Ohio State's not going to win the game.
Right.
I'm thinking because of the quarterback position, Michigan won't be able to take advantage of any maybe defensive wins that we have. We'll get some field goals. I think we'll get 2 field goals. 2 field goals and 1 touchdown. I think Michigan will score 13 points in this game. And I was going to say 28-13. But because of the weather, because it's a rivalry game, 21 points is too much. I think it's too much. And we could all be wrong about that. But I think that Michigan is going to come out, play a little bit respectful. But in the end, for Michigan fans, it really doesn't matter a whole lot. We won the national title last year. And it's this year. I mean, it's been sucking all year. That it to the point where like, oh my gosh, let's just have this end. Do we even need to have a bowl game? Seriously, like, does Michigan need to go to a bowl game this year? I know it's good. We should
be playing the Duke Mayo Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, we get to see Bryce Underwood. Shots of him.
Look, I will say this. I will say this, Nate. Like you've brought up the Missouri game several times when we've talked, but it was very similar where it doesn't matter what the bowl is. There are young dudes, like for the guys that aren't going to be in that program next year, it's not important, but there are a lot of young guys who can get some really important snaps and you can find out about who's going to be in your program and who's not. So I think you take any bowl. Yeah, as a fan, you don't really care. I checked out of the Missouri game in the first quarter, but for those guys, it's really important, especially for a young coaching staff and some young players. That is really important.
Oh yeah, totally agree with that. It's just gonna suck because they're not gonna put Michigan up against another 6-5 program because they never do. They're gonna put Michigan up against who's 13th? They're gonna have to play like Ole Miss,
Alabama,
Michigan, and like just because they're like, hey, that makes money. Let's put Michigan up against Ole Miss, and like seriously, come on, that's gonna happen. So
who would have thought? I mean, when we were first talking about the way we thought this season was going to go, that the 4th best team in the Big Ten would be Indiana, not like a USC or Michigan.
That's why the transfer portal is crazy. I mean, they have like
it is
really old team. Like that's just sort of what part of the magic of Michigan's season last year. They have good coaching and everything, but they also had really old seniors, like 6 and 7 years. And that's what Indiana has this year. They have all these old transfers and stuff that have been around forever. And it reminds me of like those, you had like a lot of the elite basketball schools in college. You get one and done teams, and then you get these players, since they have continuity on your team because the guys would only be there for a year or two, and then the team started winning were the ones that had guys hanging around for 5 years.
Yeah, Butler.
All that, and considering. If you count Harbaugh, we actually had 3 future NFL head coaches on the coaching staff.
No doubt.
When has that ever happened? I mean, I can't think of any situations where a team has done that. I'm sure there is. I'm just not thinking of it. Maybe
they've been had a few.
Yeah.
Well, look, but your point is valid. When you go and you look at the teams that win consistently have excellent coaching top to bottom. When you look at the staffs that Georgia, Alabama have historically had, the ones Michigan's had the last few years, this staff with Ohio State is absolutely loaded right now. I mean, the fact that Chip Kelly was a head coach and stepped down to be the offensive coordinator for Ohio State is our comical.
Our running back,
comical.
Oxley, is a stud too. That was a great hire.
Oh yeah, I mean it's crazy when you look at the level that you have to have. You want to be consistently developing not only your on-field talent but your coaching talent too. You have to.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's wrap this up.
Sweet.
We already had our predictions. It's Michigan, most likely Payne is going to be the prediction. But man, thanks guys for hanging out, and thanks everyone on the chat. Thanks for the super chats, and hopefully, if I'll see what I'm going to do on this day. Maybe I'll watch the game, or maybe I'll go take my kids to see Wicked. How would you guys be all right with that?
We'll have to do
Maybe go see
a
Wicked
a
instead.
review in a Big Ten championship preview, playoff preview show.
Exactly, and I'll tell you all guys all about how Wicked was. I'll give you a complete review. But in any case, thanks everyone. Glad to see you all, and go blue.
Go Bucks.
OH.
I